Greetings from Jerusalem. This has been Kerido coming to you with a new podcast mini. We've got a lot to unpack today as we will be talking about the recent acquittal of Michael J. Sussman. And this was an element that I think really concerned a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum. Obviously, conservatives were appalled that Clinton's dirty lawyer would get off so easily. But I think a lot of people on the left were actually also really surprised by what happened at the trial, largely because so much unethical and possibly illegal behavior was admitted to freely in trial proceedings that I think a lot of people were really surprised that Sussman would admit at how dirty the Clintons were during the 2016 presidential campaign. And some of the more left-leaning articles coming out post-trial and post-acquittal even acknowledged some of this really, really unethical behavior. So, for example, it is completely indisputed that Michael Sussman was paid by the Hillary campaign and the DNC to research Donald Trump, especially in connection with the whole Russian collusion hoax, and then to present that story to the FBI. The disagreement came as to whether or not Hillary and the DNC paid Michael Sussman to do all of that and also go to the FBI, or only do all of that and that he went to the FBI on his own. That was literally one of the main arguments made by the defense, that supposedly the prosecution and the Durham probe were not able to sufficiently prove that all of this unscrupulous, unethical, completely untrue, slanderous attack on Donald Trump was also intended to get to the FBI to spark an investigation. But more pertinently, how did Sussman get an acquittal? Well, one of the most important things to note is that Sussman was not on trial for any of this, which is part of the reason they admitted to it freely. What he was on trial for, the indictment, was for allegedly lying to the FBI that he came to them independently as a concerned citizen, allegedly, as opposed to on behalf of the Clinton presidential campaign and the Democratic National Convention. Apparently, the night before the meeting, Michael Sussman sent a text message to then FBI General Counsel James A. Baker that indicated that he was coming on his own behalf and not on behalf of any particular client. That was sent in a text message, and the defense admitted that this message was sent. However, the judge changed the interpretation of the indictment to say that only if Michael Sussman lied to the FBI at the meeting the next day, a 15 to 30 minute meeting on September 19th, 2016, only if the government could prove that Michael Sussman lied at that meeting, then the jury should find him guilty. If he lied any time before or after that meeting, including in the text message that it was all agreed that Michael Sussman sent to the FBI, that somehow didn't count. It's completely baffling that this would even be considered a legal premise, but that was what the judge did in order to instruct the jury to basically disregard the vast majority of evidence, as well as a lot of the context surrounding everything. So now it became an issue of he said, she said, regarding a 15 to 30 minute meeting, and even statements put in digital writing, if you will, via text message, were now somehow considered completely irrelevant due to a complete nonsensical technicality. There's another element that's really important to note from the standpoint of Judge Cooper and his jury instructions that pretty much just threw the entire trial and made it almost impossible for the jury to convict Michael Sussman, even if they had wanted to, which, since they were all a DC jury, probably most of them were not super interested in that. But there's a defense attorney and legal commentator by the name of Mr. Robert Gavea, Esquire, who talked actually at great length about the Sussman trial. He did some YouTube videos. They're definitely worth checking out. But he emphasized that instruction number 4 to the jury is really kind of shocking, because the judge actually claimed that if the jury believed that Michael Sussman had good faith and or that he didn't intend to break the law, then even if he had broken the law, then they were ordered to give him a full acquittal. That's a fancy legal way of saying, inexcusably, that if the jury believed that Michael Sussman had good intentions for lying to the FBI, then not only could they acquit him, they should grant him a full acquittal. In other words, if the jury believed that Michael Sussman was trying to save America from the evils of Donald Trump and the completely fictitious Russia collusion hoax and all that nonsense, if they felt that he believed that, then he should be sent home with no charge. That is completely ridiculous. And again, as Robert Govia, Esquire, made a comment, in what context is that a legal premise? In what context is a drunk person completely acquitted if they get behind the wheel and drive home and they just shrug and say, well, I thought I was sober enough to drive. I didn't have any bad intentions, and my good faith was that I was just going to drive home, and that was that. That is not a legal premise for anything, especially when it gets to trial. Good intentions or ignorance of the law is absolutely never an excuse, and that is used repeatedly throughout the American legal system. So the fact that Judge Cooper instructed the jury that if they, as people, many of whom donated to the DNC, living in the District of Columbia, believed that Michael Sussman, acting on behalf of Hillary Clinton, was doing something, or at least intended to do something good to save America from Russia and Putin and collusion and evil Donald Trump and Orange Man bad and everything else, give him a full acquittal. That is not just legally questionable. That is complete nonsense. Well, and sure enough, the jury followed Judge Cooper's instructions and gave him a full acquittal. It leads us to wonder if any of us, especially those of the conservative persuasion, were ever to be prosecuted by the federal government, if we would be given such leniencies as striking the vast majority of incriminating evidence against us, or if we had good intentions, then we should be sent home with no charge. One final comment comes from the closing arguments of the defense. Interestingly enough, Sussman's lawyers emphasized and tried to present evidence to this fact that the FBI, especially James Baker, were 100% aware that Michael Sussman was employed by Hillary Clinton and the DNC, meaning that there wasn't a motivation to make a false statement about whom his employers were, because the FBI was already aware of that. So this is a really interesting angle and has a lot of ramifications, because basically the defense, without saying it, is kind of subtly hinting and tiptoeing towards the suggestion that the FBI was collaborating with Sussman and completely in on all this. If that's the case, then you have reasonable doubt as to whether or not a false statement was made to the FBI, which was the actual indictment, because if they're all working on this together and co-conspirators and collaborators, then they're not lying to each other because they're all in on it together. It's a really, really interesting angle, has a lot of greater ramifications. It's fascinating that Michael Sussman's defense would go that route and tiptoe towards all of that. And it leaves us to wonder what the real agenda of the Durham probe and the federal prosecution is. Is it to go after the Clintons and bring justice for Donald J. Trump? Or is it really about exonerating the dirty and corrupt Obama-era FBI? It's hard to say, but it leaves us wondering, and we can just try to connect the dots. This has been Kerido coming to you from Jerusalem. Over and out, and see you next time. Hey everyone, this is Ben Kerido here to tell you about my brand new book that I wrote with my wife, Surat, called Let's Go Brandon the Novel. It's a satirical parody in the style of Orwell's 1984, The Babylon Bee, and Fauda. It's both a suspenseful and hilarious portrayal of current affairs in the American, Israeli, and Middle Eastern political arenas and military spheres, and includes some delightfully vicious yet comical mockery of Biden, AOC, and many others. For a limited time, the book is being made available for free or heavily discounted to our readers. Check it out on Amazon or visit our website, itowerpublishing.com. Links in the video description.